So next, Paul, if you want to get started sharing, Paul Narguizian is a professor of biological science and science education at California State University, Los Angeles. His Big History Science Education Research Lab develops curricula for non-science and science majors. The examples from the Big History and Journey of the Universe projects, popular film, science fiction, and the nature and history of science and data from scientific research. Paul?
Thank you, Dave. Hopefully everyone can hear me. Well, welcome everybody. Thank you for hearing me out today. I'm going to do a couple of things, and I hope it is okay on time. So the original talk that I wanted to give is can be seen here with the title that I submitted. Keep in mind that the abstract for this conference that I had submitted was about 8 months ago. So a lot has happened in the past 8 months, especially in the field of higher education. And about half the talk will be on the original abstract, and then the second part is going to be addressing the elephant in the room that I've been dealing with, and that is, of course, artificial intelligence and how students are going about using it. And I'm doing this partly because for selfish reasons, because I have all of you here with me, and I would love to pose a few questions and try to get some more thinking about how we as educators are going to move forward. Because a lot has been disrupted, both positive and negative, and so I want to get your feedback. And I figured since I have you here, this is a perfect opportunity. So I'll talk a little bit about what I've done with our general education biology class here at Cal State Los Angeles. I've been working on this course now for close to, I would say, 8 years, 9 years, and it's gone through reiterations due to feedback that I got from my students that I continually get every single semester that I teach this course. I should preface it that my department has been relatively open in integrating big history in a biology course. I know that sounds pretty unique. I haven't found another GE class specifically on biology that implicitly integrates big history, but I'm going to give you just a brief background as to how I'm doing this. I think it was Ken or John Hass earlier this morning who stated one of the easier ways of introducing big history in a course is if you do it through an existing course. I try to do it the other route by going through a new course curriculum, and that had much more resistance. So I took all of the learning outcomes that were stated. Those haven't changed. It's just that I'm using big history also as a pedagogical tool to help me organize the course, and that has been, from my perspective, a big bonus. So part of this, I got, or the idea came to me in that when I first thought about or was introduced to big history about 8, 9, 10 years ago now, I absolutely loved the concept. And again, it was for selfish reasons because the universe now kind of made more sense to me. I know it sounds weird coming from a biologist, but the way that I've been taught when it comes to biology and the way that I've been teaching biology was very much in a reductionistic point of view, where we were taking all of these concepts, and I was having a hard time relating the concept from, let's say, even last week to the one coming into this week. And the way that textbooks are outlined, the way that our student learning outcomes are outlined, they're very reductionistic in this approach and also extremely factoidal, where the memorization of the content and the facts become the priority, and the application of those, even though most educators would say that should be the priority, it's sort of said, but it's not really practiced. So the big history kind of gave me that platform that I could use to be able to also have students apply the material. So this page here shows you all we did was we had to increase the number of units. I'm not going to get into the reasons why. It was a Cal State University objective that was put out last year, and so we essentially increased the unit for the lecture, and by doing so, I had an opportunity to also change the title of this course. So originally it was Biology 1010, General Biology. I changed it to Biology 1000, and the title then changed to Biology for Life. And the impetus for that came again from big history, because the theme that I've been using throughout this course in the years past has been that at the end of the day, how does all of this stuff tie into you as a student who is taking this course? So I figured putting Biology for Life kind of draws that point, or that focal point, within the content that we'll be essentially covering for the 16-week semester. This class, by the way, is offered online only. It is synchronous Zoom sessions, and there are 2 meetups per week, and they're 75 minutes each. So, of course, I'm sure most of you are aware that for the past, I don't know, decades, even up until now, the majority of biology classes, both for majors and non-majors, are taught in this, very reductionistic type of approach, where we look at atoms and elements. We do a little bit of chemistry early on, and then we get into molecules and cells, tissues, to organ systems, et cetera, right? All the way up to ecosystems. And so, although, yes, there is this undertone of increasing complexity along with emergent properties, I've been doing some research and looking at just biology textbooks, and those words are barely used in both textbooks of the past, the recent past, and also current ones. Some of them are starting to use terms like complexity and systems, etc., but it's very superficial. So, of course, big history, these are, primary themes that occur throughout the thresholds. So what what sort of drove me to this, and having conversations with a colleague of mine here at Cal State LA, who's now in the Department of History, Dr. Timothy Doran, who does, by the way, teach a standalone course on big history. I put my big historian hat on, and then I kind of changed the hat to, well, at the end of the day, as a biologist, I'm a historian of life, right? So we study the history of life on this planet. So those overarching questions that I integrated into the course, and that students seem to enjoy. And by the way, it's these kinds of questions, that these more holistic, thematic, systemic questions, I find that students are more drawn to. Is, for example, what is life? How did life emerge? I.e., the origin of life. Once life emerged, how did it diversify, or radiate? And then, of course, at the end of the day, what is our human scientific origin story? But tying all of these together is the theme of the nature of science. So we biologists, especially biology educators, we love to talk about how important the understanding and application of scientific process skills are, or how important the nature of science is. And I'm going to use this term, even though we have a hard time defining it, what critical thinking is and how it should be utilized within the science classroom. And so this then put the feet to my fire, or put the fire to my feet, as far as how do I integrate the nature of science, one. Two, how do I integrate complexity, and more specifically, complex systems thinking approach within this course? Is there a way that we can take the Big Bang all the way up to the current moment, and potentially beyond, like future directions, and apply this theme of complexity and complex systems thinking throughout this general education biology class? So we start off, with threshold 1, and we make all the way, we go all the way through to threshold 8. But all throughout, this idea of increasing complexity and emergent properties are there every single week. There are discussion forum posts that students do about once every other week, where they have to place a response and then also reply to at least two other students within the course that have to do with a thematic question, taken from that threshold. I'll get back to the discussion forum posts shortly because I've noticed that at least this past semester and maybe in this past spring, the responses have been, well, excellent, but one that I suspect are not coming from the student themselves, but possibly through ChatGPT. So that's been another challenge that I'm going to try to address and ask. But another way of looking at the course that I teach is we literally go through all of these various phases up until the current moment. So yes, while the major focus is on life and life on Earth, but the environment, of course, is a major driver as to how that life has diversified um, and evolved over time. So bringing in context of astronomy, cosmology, geology, environmental science, chemistry, biochemistry, we do go through those. Of course, they're not in depth and they're not meant to be in depth, but for students to see the connection between abiotic, i.e., non-living factors, and biotic factors, and how all of these things are interconnected. So the um, the again, one of the major unifying themes that I sort of go through is that the big ideas in big history, those thresholds in big history, help me as an educator, as a biology educator, organize the course in such a way that there is a time developmental progression to this point in time. And so the ideas of the systems thinking approach that was first formulated by Mommsen et al. Focused on using the structure, relationship, function language. So, and they call this BST. So we look at individual structure or structures of that threshold plus the relationships, which equals to the function that emerges or the emergent property, more specifically complexity. I'll get a little bit more specific here. So this slide, which I took and sort of modified just a bit, you can find on the Big History Project platform, the OER project platform, etc. We use this slide. I use it both in class, on Zoom, but also students need to refer to this and use it every time they're going to either be part of a discussion forum post or respond to one of the major theme questions in that threshold, right? So for ingredients, the biological then term comes in for structure. What are the structures that we're looking at? What are the relationships, i.e., the behaviors originally known as the Goldilocks conditions? And then what emerges from that, right? So the function or the new complexity. So this again serves as a platform, and then the worksheet that I have them work on continuously. I mean, they're even modifying these as they're turning them in. I'll give them another chance to redo it the following week, where they actually put in the ingredients plus Goldilocks conditions and a new complexity response within the worksheet. I must again preface this that in the last semester or two, their responses have been pretty good, but I'm suspecting that those responses are not their own and that of artificial intelligence uses like ChatGPT, etc. Many of you may not know, but the CSU system, so our 23 campuses, the Cal State University system, recently signed an agreement with OpenAI in which I think we contributed, the actual system contributed close to 17 million. I may not have that number right, something of that sort. It was a very high price for us to partner with OpenAI so that we can make available ChatGPT to all our students, right? And so again, these kinds of things have pros and cons. And I feel like students are kind of being let out there to use these materials or to use ChatGPT without having any sort of AI literacy skills whatsoever. It's not just students, by the way, that also includes faculty as well. So this is becoming a major issue, one that sort of brings to light the assessment strategies that we've been utilizing within our classrooms, specifically biology classrooms, both online and in person, ones that were there prior to, November of 2022, I would argue. We've had assessment issues, but I think now they're at the forefront. And I look at that sort of positively also, because that then tells us we really need to, look at what we're assessing, how we're assessing, and try to modify it in such a way that is compatible with AI usage. But I'll come back to that again, as I said, in just a few minutes. So I think biology is very conducive as a discipline to using a systems-based approach. Big history gave me the pedagogical platform to make that statement more user-friendly and also more applicable. The way that I've separated my course out is the first about 8 weeks or so is dealing with complex physical systems. So it's thresholds 1 through 4. And then we have our midterm exam. And then we go into the second part of the semester where we look at thresholds 5 through 8 from a complex adaptive systems approach. So that's kind of like the two major themes that I have in my GE biology class. Keep in mind that this is a general education course. These students are non-STEM majors. So I get everybody from, literature to political science to child development, social work, economics, etc., history. So that was another impetus for me. How do I make the class more relatable to, and hopefully more approachable to non-biology majors? And again, big history gave me that platform. So the top table that you see here, these are the 5 core principles in biology outlined by the American Association for the Advancement of Science. And so what I did here was I just took the systems theme, right? That fifth one, and expanded it out this way to incorporate all of the other 4 themes. So biology is the study of living systems. Those systems interact with and respond to the environment, right? And then that can then result in emergent phenomena, phenotype, homeostasis, and of course, evolution. But continuing on with systems, those systems have their structures. Those structures interact to accomplish functions, which are then information flow, storage, and exchange, and along with transformations of energy and matter. I'm going to come back to information flow, storage, and exchange in just a moment, because I think that one's extremely important. So again, this is just a reiteration of the model that I had in the prior slide. But what we do is we do spend some time on thresholds, like I said, 1, 2, 3, 4. When we get to threshold 5, the emergence of life, that's where the bulk of the semester time is spent. And so then threshold 5 is divided into these mini thresholds, what David Christian refers to as these mini thresholds. Each of these mini thresholds then incorporate the 5 core ideas with a focus on the systems piece along with information flow. This is a table that I use for my lesson planning or unit planning to sort of bring home the point that I'm cognizant, always aware of, trying to incorporate those big 5 core ideas into these multi-level thematic biological concepts throughout the semester. So, of course, my argument is biology needs a unifying paradigm because it provides structure, number one. Number two, it also supports the instructional design, curriculum development part, and it helps learners also organize their knowledge in meaningful ways. So Paradigm shifts have always been difficult. You know, Thomas Kuhn, of course, made that very apparent in his book, The Structure of Scientific Revolutions. Paradigm shifts are very hard also when it comes to curriculum design, and also trying to convince departments why this is so important, especially in my department of biological sciences. But again, I've been lucky in that fact. My next goal is to try to incorporate this within some of the lower division biology majors classes that we have. So I'm working on that for next academic year. If you want more information on this, you can refer to my most recent publication in the Journal of Big History. This was published back in almost a year ago now, January of 2025. But I say that here because I'm going to now continue on with the second phase of this talk that I felt a very well, it's just very important to address because I think all of the conversations we've had thus far, extremely important, extremely interesting, but from an educator perspective, I think we need to address this elephant in the room. And the elephant in the room, which has been kind of tippy-toed around, is that we are now living in an age of misinformation. I mean, a few of the speakers did address this. I know Tyler Volk early on this morning asked a question about this as well. And where does this now almost like this post-truth world, how does that fit in to what I'm trying to do as a biologist, as a biology educator, where I have students coming up to me and showing me, what they saw on the latest TikTok video and what they're saying about whether it's civilizational collapse or evolution or intelligent design or we never landed on the moon, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? So this is now becoming much more apparent. I've been sort of testing ChatGPT in giving it these kinds of questions regarding misinformation. But if I ask it to argue for how we did not land on the moon, it gives me an argument. It gives me a rationale for, yep, this is how we didn't land on the moon, or or that never happened. It was in a movie studio, etc. And the way it does it is that it gives pretty strong arguments. Of course, it's all fake. I mean, it's not real. But students who are using ChatGPT can now argue and say, well, look, here's my argument for this or that. And so anyway, I'm putting these questions up here. Obviously, we're not going to answer these today, but I wanted to sort of have these as a guidepost. So how can we effectively assess students' abilities to identify misinformation? What diagnostic tools best reveal how students evaluate evidence, causal claims, and sources? How do we measure their ability to recognize logical fallacies, motivated reasoning, and manufactured doubt? What forms of assessment should we be now doing that can be argued should have been done even before ChatGPT became or was made public, right? Because I don't think we were assessing students properly before ChatGPT anyway. But I think that now highlighted more once when these kinds of models became public. How can we evaluate students' understanding of uncertainty, model-based reasoning, or theory/evidence relationships and non-linearity? What assessment frameworks reveal whether students can apply nature of science principles to real world problems? What new literacies are required now to understand AI as an information processing system with constraints, biases, and epistemic limits? How do we assess students' use of AI tools in ways that then align with the nature of science and scientific reasoning? How do we distinguish between AI supported thinking and AI replaced thinking? What competencies must students possess to critically evaluate AI generated information? What new literacies again are required for this? What can mastery look like, right? When a student or someone who's a learner is trying to reason across scales and disciplines? How do we evaluate emergence, systems reasoning, causal modeling, and feedback analysis? And then, of course, what assessment strategies help students transfer nature of science, critical thinking, complex systems thinking reasoning to socio-scientific issues such as climate change, public health, biotechnology, planetary boundaries, right? And then, of course, how do we measure whether students can detect misinformation and pseudoscience in these domains using nature of science tools? This, this last one is extremely, extremely important to me. So what I did was this past semester, I kind of refocused the systems thinking approach and came up. I didn't come up with this, obviously, but I focused on essentially this sentence that I got from Professor Kyle Harper, who was our keynote presenter back in the summer of 2024 at our IBHA conference. And what he said was, in biology, information processing and energy flows have been at the core of increasing complexity. I know there's been some talk about this in previous discussions today, but from a biological perspective, this is true. I mean, this is, as far as our understanding goes, as of this point in science, in biological sciences, this hits at the core of biology, right? So information about the environment is that which evolves, Adami said back in 2012. And of course, another famous book, Major Evolutionary Transitions or Major Transitions in Evolution, biology examines increases in complexity driven by transitions in information storage and transmission. So the reason why I wanted to put this here is because I'm now looking at content versus what's out there in social media, and these two things are clashing, right? So there is content as far as the scientific, our most current understanding of the universe and life. And then I have my students are also coming in, looking at the content and then getting some other content on social media, which is completely false. So how do I, as an educator, try to bring those two together in a way to confront the misinformation, disinformation, and the pseudoscience that they're exposed to constantly on their phones? So the take home message then for my course now is information flow, storage, and exchange. And of course, from a biological perspective, this is the foundation, right? So in the case of life, we have a heavy focus in my class on genetic information, transcription, translation, etc. And then, of course, through big history, I also target cultural information, which is, of course, it comes from collective learning that David Christian has put out there, which I find extremely engaging and fascinating. And so I try to look at these things in such a way where we talk about genetic information. Of course, we address mutations and what can happen, and the diseases that are out there, etc. And also what can happen then when there is misinformation and disinformation when it comes to collective groups of humans, and how that could affect, for example, pandemics or the spread of disease. We look at both historical examples of that, and we also look at the current COVID-19 pandemic that occurred and that is still occurring, by the way. I know people are saying that we're not in a pandemic mode anymore, but this virus is still evolving, and the way that the cultural information shifts have occurred and I'm going to pick on the U.S. as of late, is um, extremely challenging, I would say, at the least. So the point becomes, when you have this infodemic, this pandemic of misinformation, where does information literacy fit in? And although we have courses on information literacy and in journalism departments, etc., I felt like I can tie it into biology, just like we can tie in how mutations can affect, in some cases, not all. Most mutations are fine and harmless, but in some cases they can affect the organism and the population as a whole. Then misinformation, the analogy would be, can also potentially lead to civilizational collapse. Um, and so, again, this is nothing new. We've been dealing with this for decades. Misinformation has been out there ever since we started telling stories to each other. So, again, for thousands of years, a couple of hundred thousands of years. So it's not new. What is new is the rate at which the misinformation and disinformation spreads. When we say something goes viral, I mean, talk about an analogy, right? So Richard Feynman here says that the first principle is that you must not fool yourself, and you are the easiest person to fool. And of course, I love this quote because I think we need to really be mindful and cognizant about integrating not only complex systems thinking, which I look at as the content piece, but also the nature of science, what science is, what science isn't. And although big history does that a bit, when it comes to claims testing, I think we really need a new big history approach where the nature of science is embedded throughout. And so if you ask me, how do we do that? I don't have a perfect answer yet, but I have a few answers that I hope to publish in the Journal of Big History in the near future. I love this slide, by the way. I got this from one of my colleagues who is dealing with or was dealing with intelligent design and is still dealing with it, and I am as well. But essentially, you have all this, really cool math and science going on, and then when we as scientists can't explain something, the intelligent design person would say, "Well, then a miracle occurs," and then complexity continues. Of course, this is not it wouldn't be accepted in science. And so accepting this otherwise in other fields might be okay, but not in the field of science. If we don't know, we don't know, and that's fine. Carl Sagan, of course, had hundreds of quotes, thousands, I would say, which I love, but this one really hits the point home. If we teach only the findings and products of science, no matter how useful and even inspiring they may be, without communicating its critical method, how can the average person possibly distinguish science from pseudoscience? Right? So, yes, the big history story is fascinating. It's amazing. I find it almost I don't want to use the word magical, but it's awe-inspiring. But if that's all I'm doing without really driving the point as to how we know what we know, then at the end of the day, when students are confronted with pseudoscience, they may not be able to tell the difference. So this is something that we really, as big historians, as people who are interested in big history, really need to be cognizant of. How do we integrate the nature of science within big history courses? So just to close here, Dave, how many minutes do I have left?
0.
Oh, okay. Thank you. All right. Let me just close then with this final thought. Um, I think that Ken Solis, who gave an excellent presentation earlier today on ethics and bioethics, I think that we really need to integrate alongside complex systems thinking this ethical dimension, ethical from both, in my case, a biological, and then ethical from the case of artificial intelligence, especially artificial general intelligence. And the reason why I put CRISPR and synthetic biology, and also if you look at the right-hand bottom corner, I thought it was timely, maybe even integrating some literature. And, we always talk about STEAM, but we really need to integrate the arts as part of our science conversation. CP Snow's words, of course, come to play. The two cultures. I don't see it as two cultures. I see it as one human culture that can integrate both of these things, both the sciences and the arts together. And I think Mary Shelley's book, Frankenstein, has a lot of open opportunities to talk about the ethical and bioethical dimensions of what we're currently doing. Thank you. I look forward to your questions or comments.
All right. Thank you very much, Paul. That was very good and very timely. And I really like your analogy of, the misinformation as cultural mutations. That's very interesting. Question, Gerald? Gerald?
Yeah. Paul, thank you. I feel very how do I say? I feel with you about the difficulty of the position that you're in and the challenges that you have to meet with misinformation and offering information to students that maybe have not learned so much, and then with limited knowledge have to determine whether something is bullshit or science. So I think you are doing what I hear from what you're doing. It sounds absolutely great, actually. So a warm-hearted praise for you. I have a small thing that I could help you with, I think, and that is in my latest book, I gave 12 science criteria. That means things that scientists normally do to assure that their work is scientifically okay. You might use that. And with respect to the kind of hierarchies and things that you showed about big history, I hope you attend my talk on Wednesday, because I think you will enjoy that.
I will, Gerard. Thank you so much. I didn't have a chance. I'm just going to share really, really quick one more time. I didn't have a chance to go through my final slides, but Gerard, on your point, I do spend time going through some of the aspects about what science is and what science isn't, specifically what pseudoscience is, and the importance of looking at things like falsifiability, logic, objectivity, alternative explanations, etc. But outside of this, I also have the 9 core principles, if you will, of the nature of science. And so, yeah, I'm very interested in attending your talk and also buying your book.
And I would like to get in contact with you.
Thank you. Please do.
Yeah.
And I have my email here, but I think Dave, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think these are also available on the abstracts, correct?
Not yet, I
No?
think.
Okay.
Yeah, we can make them available.
Okay, thank you.
Excellent. Ken?
Yeah, I see that occasionally you had it and sometimes you didn't. With the information thing, it seems to me that information processing or manipulation should be in the chain. It was present in some of the slides later, but what's important is that we're not just electrical lines transmitting fields of force or particles or whatever, but living organisms are able to manipulate and process information, because what one hormone does, for example, in one animal does something different in another. It's a neurotransmitter does in one area of the brain, does it different. There's changes that occur. And in philosophy, the truth is sometimes defined as that which correlates with reality. And another way to phrase it in informational terms, what's happening besides the increasing rate of disinformation or misinformation, as you're stating, is in Claude Shannon's terms, would be a signal to noise ratio. So we're getting more noise in the system. So there's different ways to phrase it, but those are just a couple of thoughts. Is there a reason why you didn't have information processing or manipulation in your earlier slides?
Yeah, just time, Ken, and I was because this was eating at me for the past not just for the past few weeks getting ready for this conference, but just throughout my coursework, throughout the students' responses, etc. And I know we didn't have as much time. We had 20 minutes about to present, so every point that you just stated, yes, it's there. At least in the upcoming paper, it's there as well. I just didn't have time to talk about it. But yeah, and I think what's really gnawing at me is that, we're at this point where Lowell kind of hinted at this too, where we have this, immense amount of scientific information, and the information is out there and we're like inundated with it.
Yeah.
Our students are also inundated with it. So what I'm trying to do is, how do we then reframe our pedagogy so that they're able to better filter the information in a way that is not only conducive to my class, for example, but also for their lives. I mean, some of these kids are coming in and they're totally against, getting vaccinated or getting their flu shots. Now, it doesn't mean that wasn't the case before COVID. I was still talking about this stuff, getting your flu shot every year to my students, prior to COVID. But it just seems like now, it's exponentially increased as far as
Right.
they're also there. And what I failed to mention, because I didn't get to my last slide, they're also their confidence and trust when it comes to institutions, and also particularly institutions of higher learning, has been degraded immensely. I would say these past 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, for those who don't know, the autism thing started with a corrupt doctor in England getting paid off by lawyers to falsify a study. He got paid tens of thousands and more millions in grants. He lost his license. His name is Dr. Wakefield. So he's almost like a mass murderer by a different set of means. Um,
By
and
the
you
way,
could say, yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to add to that like the point is here. So the class that I teach has 192 students in it. This is a fully online course, which means that the exams are also online. We don't have here at Cal State LA, we don't have a proctoring platform, where they need to turn their videos on, or they can't use anything else or whatever. So they're free to use anything they want. So technically, it's open book, open notes, open social media, whatever, right? And so what I've also noticed is, yeah, I can ask a specific big history, multiple choice question, and just by plugging that into ChatGPT, it's giving them the right answer without even having to read the book, without even having to read my notes, without having to do anything, right? So that wasn't the case as much before November 2022. And so now, does that mean that my assessments are bad now, but they were good then? No, I would probably argue they were bad prior to ChatGPT becoming public, right? Because if all I'm doing is using multiple choice. The other thing is my hands are tied. I can't, how am I going to grade 200 exams in a timely manner within, a few weeks time? And so I think assessment has to change. So I'm now thinking about getting rid of midterms and finals. And so students are going to work on a project. And not only that, they're going to do it in such a way where I can't use blue books because we don't meet in person, right? So they're going to need to handwrite their response and take photos of it and upload it onto Canvas. And so, yeah, that sounds ridiculous. Probably it sounds. I can't even believe I'm saying this to my colleagues right now. But I'm going to try anything I can to try to make assessment more authentic. And even if they're still copying, even if they're looking at ChatGPT and writing down their answers, right? I'm hoping there is something that filters in at least, rather than just copying and pasting it.
Very good. Lowell?
Hi, thanks, Paul. Great as always. You mentioned I think you said the extreme challenging conditions that coming from various sources of misinformation. Among them, of course, our government. We have the CDC now being staffed by people who seem to accept, kind of pseudoscience or something. And this has affected grantsmanship. I guess what's been the effect on scientists of politics of our political system withdrawing grants for legitimate scientific research or for seemingly being opposed to science? I mean, this relationship that we've developed between politics and science is really worrisome.
It is, Lowell, and thank you for asking. So politically, I have colleagues not only here at Cal State LA, but also throughout the CSU system, who have not gotten their grants reinstated. And so not only have their labs shut down, but they've also lost their grad students. They can't even plan for the next academic year because they don't even know if they're going to get the funding coming in for the next academic year, even though they still have 4 more years on their grant. And so this has been detrimental to the field of science, specifically in the STEM fields. And what it's doing is I have colleagues not in the CSU per se, but throughout the UC system, who are leaving their institutions to go and study or continue their work in Europe, for example, or Australia, or Canada, or elsewhere. I mean, they just can't work in these conditions. And so what that leads to me, or what that leads to potentially, is that we then get, a situation where scientists are not doing their work, students are not also in their labs conducting the research, and by the way, getting a healthy dose of the nature of science, right? What science is and what science isn't. And so it's being degraded. And what I fear about that is if you look at the big history continuum along with civilizations throughout time, science has been a big help proponent for getting people to a stage where disease has been decreased, information in a positive sense has helped people's lives overall. And I just don't see that continuing in that form, at least, in the foreseeable future, unless if policy changes. And that's where folks where in the political sciences come in. So my hope is that because of this GE that I teach, I have poli-sci majors in there. So I want to integrate policy. What role does policy play in a biology class? Big history gives me that platform to be able to talk about those issues. Journalists trying to understand science is critical, right? To be able to ask the right questions to politicians.
We only have about 2 minutes left before we get to
Okay,
the
sorry.
next lecture on
Yeah. Timothy?
Yeah, so I teach big history at Cal State LA. Also, for those of you who don't know me, I teach it from the history department. I've been doing this for many years now. Mark Chotola in the chat says equity is one reason given for the lack of proctoring, and I think this is really important for us to think about. In my view, quality should not be sacrificed on the altar of equality or equity, which has its own extremely fraught sort of ideas about equality of result. And the other point I would say is that there's an interesting thing that Stephen Satkiewicz writes. The older methods are coming back. Yeah, everything that I do almost is in class a proctored exam for the classes that meet in person. So Blue Book or on paper. That is the bulk of the students' grade now because ChatGPT has ruined the honesty of essay writing.
Timothy, who is my colleague, he may have been off camera or muted for like when I started my talk, Timothy, but I gave you credit and said that I have a colleague here at Cal State LA who also teaches a class on big history.
I did hear that. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I think Todd?
Yeah, I know we're almost out of time. So Paul, thanks.
Hey, Todd.
Appreciate it. Hi. I appreciate it as always. Lots of things you said, and we can talk more about some of them later, especially the process of science, right? And how to make sure that that's woven in. But one thing I just wanted to bring up, because I think it's really important and easily gets lost in the noise, to highlight something you said, and I think John and maybe some other people said earlier, is just to have us really think about, this question of big history as an organizing principle for existing classes. I think is a really powerful way to move things forward, because just the structure of the silos makes it so hard to have big history specific classes in a lot of our institutions. But that doesn't mean we can't be doing big history the way you're demonstrating beautifully. So I just want to kind of highlight that for our ongoing discussion about how can we maybe formalize that more, and how can we make that more easier, I guess, easier for everyone to do.
Yeah, we're out of time. If we want to stay on schedule for the rest.
Thanks, Todd.
Yeah. So